This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, John Halpin.
Hey everybody, it's John Halpin. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 5th edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by Fanball. With me today, starting today and every Tuesday throughout the NFL season, is my RotoWire colleague, Jake Letarski. And Jake and I are going to talk about fab bids and waiver pickups and things like that. And you might be saying, it's week one. I don't need any of that. Might not be true, right, Jake?
Yeah, absolutely. I know plenty of leagues that drafted in July, like our Vegas league, for example, and there's running a fab period on Wednesday, and there are a lot of players that definitely need to be taken note of. And there's been suspensions and injuries and all sorts of different things that are going to affect those fab bids. I've done this the last few years, the waiver wire period, and if you remember listening to me in the past years, it's the most important podcast you're going to listen to all week, because really getting that edge on the waiver wire is what's going to make the difference in your league.
Yeah, I got to say, I drafted some teams early, and I looked at them last week, and I'm going, what in the world was I doing?
Mm-hmm. I got a Spencer Ware share I got to replace already, and some of those early drafts, they'll get you. You know,
the one I was mad about, O.J. Howard, because I liked, at the time, I said, rookie tight end. And I know rookie tight ends don't have a great history, but I said, you know what, the guy's really talented. It's another weapon for Jameis, and I think it's a low-end tight end one. It's great. And I keep joking around that everybody who's come on, so many people have come on this podcast over the summer and said, the problem with O.J. Howard is that he's too good of a blocker, so he's going to stay in and block while Cameron Brate goes out for passes.
Yeah, I know people were making the argument that, maybe having an athlete like O.J. Howard will take away from Mike Evans. I wasn't buying that because of the rookie tight end, and he's built 6'6", 250 to be a blocker. And he's probably one of those players at this point that you'll be thinking about cutting to add some of the players that we're going to talk about today.
Bummer for me, but Jake's here to help. All right, so first guy I want to talk about here, beyond what we just did, Andrew Luck. What do we do? What's your leash in a season-long league? I know it's a moving target, but what's a fantasy owner who drafted him to do? You can't cut him yet, and you can't play him this week. Beyond that, this is scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Andrew Luck is someone that you need to hold on to still, because I do believe that when healthy, there's QB1 potential. He is a QB1, and he's still owned in 93% of Yahoo leagues. That's about where he needs to be. But I'm a little bit concerned. You're going to have to monitor this. I'm hoping by week 3 or 4 we have some clarity, and we'll be able to do that. But until then, hopefully we're going to be able to help you provide a replacement. Streaming quarterbacks is something that I've definitely no stranger to as someone who likes to wait on quarterbacks anyway. I don't typically advise going after Scott Tolzien yet, unless you're in one of those 2 quarterback leagues where every backup and everyone that's playing in a given week is always snatched up on the waiver wire. But in your standard 12-team league, there are a couple replacement options that we'll get to for someone like Luck, and hopefully in a couple weeks we get a little bit more clarity.
Scott Tolzien. So what did someone pointed out yesterday, and I retweeted it. We could have a McCown Nathan Peterman matchup. We've got let's see. There's a Bortles. Who are the Jags playing? I'm looking at the schedule and I'm trying to find. We got a Bortles Tom Savage matchup.
Yep. Oh boy. Yeah, there's going to be some brutal ones in week 1, but at least the primetime games are awesome.
Tolzien Jared Goff.
Tolzien Jared Goff. Yeah, the point spread on that game swung a little bit to the point where the Rams are 3.5-point home favorites. You take out the home away thing. We basically think Jared Goff is a half a point better than Scott Tolzien, but that's just going to be a mess of a game.
But that line went 6 points with the announcement that Luck was out, right?
Definitely swung, because the Colts opened as 3-point favorites, and now it's 3.5 in the Rams' direction.
Okay, everybody. Again, we want to thank Fanball for sponsoring the RotoWire Fantasy Podcast. Check them out at fanball.com. Also on Twitter, Jake is at JakeSki52. I'm at JHelp37, and you can also tweet us anytime at RotoWire or at RotoWire NFL, where you're going to find some player updates, which is going to help over the course of the week. And just so you know, from a scheduling standpoint, everybody, Tuesday mornings we're going to do this about fab and free agent pickups and things like that. Thursday, I'm going to preview the week with Thursday mornings with Tim Heaney, and Friday afternoons late with Derek Van Riper. We're sort of going to put a bow on the week with everything. We're going to have all the injury reports in, sort of start sit type of stuff based on everything we know. So everybody, please check it out. And Mondays we're going to wrap up. Derek and I are going to wrap up the weekend. So that's your schedule: 4 days a week: Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Check it out, please. Okay, so we're going to go to quarterbacks. So if you have Luck, or if you have, who are our vulnerable starting quarterback types this week. Are you worried about Wentz is not a starter? Carson Palmer at Detroit, he's probably fine, but he was a QB2 for most people anyway.
Exactly.
Are you worried about Derek Carr at Tennessee at all?
Not a whole lot. The game still has an over-under of 51.5. That's one of the higher ones on the week. And I think he'll find a way. There's enough weapons on that offense that he'll find a way to score sooner or later. I know Tennessee has a pretty strong defense, but and it is a road matchup. But yeah, Derek Carr will be able to get his points. But again, a lot of people are drafting him as that low-end QB1, QB2. So it really does depend on who your other option is. All
right, Roethlisberger, negative is a road game. Positive is he's at Cleveland. He was a borderline QB1 in drafts anyway. He was sort of going as QB13 in drafts. He's a guy you could think about benching if the matchup suggested it, right? If the matchup for your second quarterback suggested it anyway.
Yeah, I guess you could. At the same time, the Browns, they did improve their pass rush and their secondary through the draft this year, adding guys like Myles Garrett and Jabril Peppers. So they're improved. And yeah, it's the road game, but it is the Browns after all. And I still imagine that Big Ben will get about 202 touchdowns, like an average week for him. So again, it does depend on what your matchup dictates.
All right, and then one other game we're going to need to watch: Tampa Bay at Miami. As of right now, look, we're very early in the Hurricane Irma process. It's out in the ocean. But right now, Miami is sort of, I don't know about center of the track, but it's pretty close to get there on Saturday night. So I would think, and maybe Sunday. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a weatherman, as you probably know. But we're going to need to watch that one. And the game, look, the game couldn't get canceled. I don't know if it would move to Tuesday night. We have no idea what could happen with that. But just keep
that would be a mess for fantasy week one to have a Thursday through Tuesday unique week and the very first one to kick it off. That'll be fun to see websites handling that.
Yeah, so this could. I mean, the NFL has not said Tuesday. We're just kind of speculating. Hey, if Miami gets hit by a Category 4 hurricane, you would imagine there would be some adjustments that need to be done, certainly. And we hope that doesn't happen. And, shifting out to sea doesn't look likely at this point, but hopefully we'll get some good news on that hurricane. All right, so anyway. Quarterbacks, who, if you're going to pick up, replace Luck, who's first on your list of the guys?
The first guy that comes out on my list is actually Sam Bradford of the Vikings. He gets a Monday night game against the Saints, and the over/under on that game is 48, so it's not one of the highest of the week, but defensively, that's just such an excellent matchup. You take last year's stats with a grain of salt, but last year the Saints were dead last, even behind my Green Bay Packers, in passing yards allowed per game. So Sam Bradford's someone who's only owned in 18% of Yahoo leagues. If you didn't draft a QB2 to complement Luck, or have one of those really shaky matchups, he's someone that I wouldn't mind picking up and rolling with, because you know how the Saints like to get into shootouts, and the Vikings are going to have to score a lot of points to keep up, typically, and he might, there'll be situations where he's throwing the ball up to Stephon Diggs, he'll be hitting Rudolph over the middle, and of course those dump off passes to Dalvin Cook. If Cook busts one for 60, I think he still gets a passing touchdown for that. So there's plenty of opportunities for a guy like Sam Bradford to score points, and a lot of availability out there as well.
Is that new stadium, or were they in there last year? I don't remember.
Oh, man. I'm not 100% sure. I think they maybe were in there last year.
All right. I don't remember. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah. I think it was last year, because they had that giant horn that they started blowing every week, and that was like their new tradition. So I think this is year 2 in the stadium.
That's right. Okay. Also, this goes into the theme that I keep mentioning, that people have been stopping by on this podcast all summer and telling me how the Vikings offense is better than we think. Than the conventional wisdom would suggest. So I'm buying this Sam Bradford pick for you. Who else do you like? Quarterback. You got it. You sent me some names ahead of time, and one guy I want to ask you about, Tyra Taylor.
Yes,
I like it.
Yep.
But here's the Jets are in a weird spot, because their defense is actually still pretty solid, even though they traded Sheldon Richardson. But you would think that the offense is going to be so bad that at some point the defense is just going to have to wear down, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And especially with the team with the running game of the Buffalo Bills. Now, a word of caution with Tyrod Taylor, dealing with concussion symptoms, but he seems to be progressing through protocol pretty well. He was taking part in individual drills in yesterday and Monday's practice, so that's definitely a good sign. Now, as you did allude to earlier in the show, there's always a chance that Nate Pearman would take over if Tyrod Taylor isn't quite ready. But I do like this matchup against the Jets. One, because you mentioned the defense wearing down, and you look at the numbers from last year, kind of a middle of the pack in terms of pass defense. And Tyrod Taylor had, I think, he had his best fantasy game against the Jets in week 2 of last year, 297 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, tied for the most passes completed of 20 plus and 40 plus yards last year. So, you can't put too much in last year, but at the same time, that's a little bit telling. And if Tyra Taylor is able to get out there and get the start, continue progressing through the concussion protocol, I think he's a pretty decent stream matchup. He's only owned in about 50% of Yahoo leagues right now.
Okay. We're going to move over to Arizona, Detroit. Stafford's owned in 91% of Yahoo leagues. Carson Palmer, 63. If you're in a shallower format, you kind of like Palmer. That game, the over-under, you saw. I'm
seeing 48 right now.
Yeah, I'm seeing 48 too.
Palmer. So there's going to be some points scored in that game.
Yeah, for 24-21 kind of game, 27-24, whatever. So, okay.
Yeah, and the Cardinals, they have weapons. The Lions defense, they've got a pretty solid pass rush and everything. But the Cardinals offense, again, you get those dump offs to David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, John Brown, assuming those guys will be out there, and ready to go. And of course, a sneaky late round sleeper that I've always liked a little bit, J.J. Nelson. Maybe Palmer can get him over the top once or twice. And I drafted Carson Palmer as a quarterback too in a lot of leagues, and he is making this matchup interesting when I'm thinking about if I have because I've got one dilemma where it's either Derek Carr or Carson Palmer, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to lean towards Carr against the Titans. But as we kind of discussed earlier, it's a tough matchup, and it's something to think about for sure. Okay.
Next one down on your list. Actually, the last one on your list, Mike, if you're reaching, I would guess.
Yeah, this is more for a 2-quarterback format. So we're going to try to cover all bases on this podcast. So, we already alluded to some of those really fringe guys, the Piermans and the Tolziens that, only 2-quarterback formats. And I would throw Glennon into that mix because he's probably someone that was, barely taken in 2-quarterback formats, if so at the end. And I see potential for garbage time against the Falcons. Of course, the Falcons, that devastating Super Bowl loss, they're going to want to come out strong with a fast start, aggressive. They're 7-point favorites. The over-under on that game is 49.5. But the Bears at home, the offensive weapons are a little bit shaky, especially they take a big hit with Cam Meredith. But this is a situation where I'm maybe not a ton of first half points for Glennon, but I'm looking more to garbage time when the safeties are deep and they'll be able to connect a little bit over the middle as Glennon tries to figure out who's going to be the main guy there catching passes.
All right, 4% of Yahoo leagues, everybody.
So he's out there for this week only. I'm not advising to hang on to him long term or spend more than $1 in fab money on him, but
right.
Maybe this week will get you somewhere.
Okay. The guys I was thinking about, actually one, I'm going to explain why you would think he might be attractive, but I don't think he is. One is Jared Goff, who I kind of like in this mix because he's playing at home against the Colts. I don't love Goff generally, but the Colts could be bad, and this could be an ugly game for the Colts. The defense isn't good. I mean, where would Goff be in this mix? I mean, you didn't add him, so you don't seem like you like him that much.
Yeah, the more I look at it, though, I like to see these different perspectives. Colts were bottom 10 pass defense last year, and Goff is at home. You have to imagine Goff is only going up from what he was able to do last year. There's not much room for regression there for sure. So yeah, I could definitely see it, probably limiting it to the 2-quarterback leagues. If you're in a standard 12-teamer, chances are one of the guys that we mentioned should be out there on the waiver wire. But hey, Goff's a chance, and I think about equivalent with Glennon there, maybe as far as options that you could pick up to start.
Okay. The other thing I want to alert everybody to, because I would suspect that some people are going to be recommending Brian Hoyer. I like Brian Hoyer. Okay. I think Brian Hoyer is on a couple of my teams as a second quarterback because I like the situation. I like that he's with Shanahan and everything. However, please, 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 I'm telling you, I know you're going to call me a homer. The Panthers defense is going to be very good. Last year, they were 29th in pass defense. And if you look at that, you're going to look at it and say, man, this is a nice home matchup for Hoyer. I don't buy it. I think the Panthers defense is good. Hoyer, if people tell you to stream Hoyer, I would like to express my word of caution on that right now because the Panthers defense is better than you think. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Luke Kuechly, who missed all those games last year, he's back and ready to go. And I think that provides just a massive boost for those guys. I mean, Kuechly is the difference maker, heart and soul of a defense. So yep. I do think that they were a little bit underrated when I looked at most team defense cheat sheets this year. And I do agree with you. Picking up Brian Hoyer to stream, maybe not the greatest. It'd be different if the 49ers had a load of offensive weapons, but I think they're going to try to run the ball a lot. And then we might see a lot of Pierre Garçon. They don't really have much out of a tight end since they traded McDonald. So, yeah, I would caution against that streaming matchup.
Yeah, and everybody, Panthers corner, James Bradbury, Pro Bowler. Watch. Listen, you heard it here. All right.
I'll keep an eye out for it, John.
It's not unique because everybody in Charlotte thinks the same thing. So I'm not going to claim to be some groundbreaking, put my flag in the ground on that one. But he's really good. All right, everyone, you've tried daily fantasy sports games. And I know how it went. You had fun playing. You loved the competition. And you lost. And you lost. And you lost some more. I know that. I've gone through that. In tournaments, especially. Yeah, when you play against the Sharks, it can be kind of rough, so sometimes you quit playing. Playing daily fantasy is supposed to be fun, but continually losing isn't. But I'm going to tell you here about a whole new approach to daily fantasy sports, the Fanball number at fanball.com. Here's the Fanball difference. Your Fanball number identifies your skill level, and it ensures that you play in contests against players at your skill level. If your Fanball number is 35, you're not going to be playing against experts rated in the 80s and 90s. They have their own contest. At fanball.com, every player has a Fanball number, and every contest has a Fanball number. So if you can find a contest rated around 35, knowing that it'll have players like yourself. They've leveled the playing field with the Fanball number at fanball.com. Have more fun and a better chance to win. You got a few days to sign up for that, for daily fantasy, so go check it out. All right, running backs. So let's say you did draft early in the summer, and your first fab run is this week, and Kareem Hunt's out there on the waiver wire. What do you do?
Yeah, well, Kareem Hunt is available in 7% of Yahoo leagues, so there are a handful of teams out there or a handful of leagues that he might be around in, particularly in those early drafts that haven't allowed any pickups yet. He's a very intriguing option. Of course, with the Spencer Ware injury, he expects to step in and be the guy. I guess Charkandrick West is behind him, someone with at least a bit of familiarity in that offense. But Kareem Hunt is someone that it very much depends on your draft strategy and your current needs as to how much you're going to bid on him. If you did that whole punt running back strategy where you went quantity over quality with hopes that one of those guys would pan out towards the end, then your bid jumps a lot. You can make a case for all of it. I'd say most people, if you're set at running backs, probably only need to bid around $75 to 75% of your fab. We usually work off a $100 budget. And I'm high on Hunt, but I definitely am not expecting Brian Westbrook or LaShawn McCoy out of this Andy Reid offense. He's not quite at that level athletically. Our own Mario Puig kind of pointed out in one of his NFL barometers how the combine numbers, 4.6, 240, the broad jump even about 119, I think. I'm just kind of spitballing off the top of my head there, but they don't scream exceptional athlete. And I did mention that maybe Charkandrick West is waiting around, and there could be a little bit more of a split than I hoped. But I think he'll be a good player. He'll get enough downs. The Chiefs, of course, we all know they're going to run the ball a lot. Tyreek Hill might get some of those runs, so we'll have to see on that. But overall, he's someone that you spend 75 to 80% of your budget on, just based purely on opportunity, because you could be the most skilled athlete in the world and not quite have the opportunity. And there's a 50-50 split in trying to scout these players. Kareem Hunt definitely checks out 100% in the opportunity department.
He sure does. Everybody, a word of warning about Kareem Hunt. The Chiefs just signed Akeem Hunt to their practice squad. Do not pick up Akeem Hunt when trying to pick up Kareem Hunt. You'll be mocked.
Yes, I saw a lot of people do that in drafts, burn a third-round pick on Akeem Hunt. If you do a Twitter search for it, you'll find a bunch of people lamenting about that. So absolutely be very careful. Kareem.
Yes. Be very, very careful. You don't want to be mocked by your friends and by us. So please stay away from Akeem Hunt. All right, Cowboy running backs. Ezekiel Elliott, as we're doing this Tuesday, almost noon Eastern, we don't have any Ezekiel Elliott news. So if you have Ezekiel Elliott, or even if you want to take a flyer on a back and you don't have Ezekiel Elliott, it could be tempting to try to get one of the Cowboy backups if they're still available. Is it still, if you had Zeke, would you make an investment in Darren McFadden, or are you too worried about the idea of a committee there?
The committee would be the most likely outcome, but Darren McFadden would lead that committee, and behind that Dallas offensive line, that potentially gets you RB2 production. So Darren McFadden, only owned in 84% of Yahoo leagues, so there is a 16% chance he's out there. If you take a look, I think he'd be worth a very heavy fab bid as well. Alfred Morris could sneak some of that goal line work, which is the worry with the committee, and maybe Alfred Morris would be worth a look in a 16-team format. But the way it's looking with Elliott right now, we don't know if that suspension is going to be holding the very first week. Only time will tell. We'll hopefully get you updated on the pod. Of course, you can always check out RotoWire for the latest news. But so yeah, there is a bit of a committee. But McFadden, if he's out there, warrants, I'd say, almost a 50% fab bid if he just because of the uncertainty with Elliott. It is a bit of a gamble, and it all depends on how risk averse you are. But if he's out there, I think you need to at least be bidding on him. Even if you don't really need him, you need to go throw out $15 to $25 on him just to always be improving your roster.
Okay. Jacquizz Rodgers, what is his ownership level? You have that handy?
I believe it is pretty heavy. I'm going to take a peek right now. Not as heavy as I thought, only 61%. And Jacquizz Rodgers is someone that, of course, while Doug Martin is suspended, he was used heavily in the absence of Martin at the end of last season. And the skill levels there, he's able to catch passes out of the backfield, so he does help for your PPR. Charles Sims is around, so he might cut into that workload a little bit. But I believe Jacquizz Rodgers is startable. Now, of course, he's in that game that's supposed to be played at Miami, so that's another level of uncertainty there. But these first 3 weeks, one of the players that I was advocating for, if you did take Ezekiel Elliott early in drafts and were expecting that 6-game suspension, Rodgers was another one of those players like McFadden that I was saying could be productive early in the year because of the Doug Martin suspension there.
Okay. Let's move on to the Jacquizz Rodgers. That game last year when he had to start against I think it was the Panthers. It was a Monday night game. I think he carried the ball 10 times on the first drive, and he went 30 for 100. So he wasn't particularly effective, but the volume was, you said earlier, you used the word opportunity. There's certainly some opportunity there for Jacquizz Rodgers. Eagles. So there were some rumblings the last few weeks about maybe they were unhappy with LeGarrette Blount, and maybe they're going to cut him, which they didn't. Doug Peterson says, it's going to depend on the situation. I don't know who my lead back's going to be. You're like, oh, God, not this again.
Here we go.
Darren Sproles is going to get his share. But Blount with Wendell Smallwood, what do you think? Is Wendell Smallwood worth a pickup? It would seem to me it would have to be sort of a stash kind of thing, but you can say that about a lot of people.
I always do like to throw out a couple stash options on this show. Someone that maybe won't be so great this coming week against Washington, but could be helpful for you in the mid to late parts of the season. A theme that I'll always go back to is you should be, even if your starters are all set, you should be improving your roster and maximizing your roster top to bottom every week. You can't afford to be passive on the waiver wire in a given week. And Smallwood is someone that could potentially help your team. Darren Sproles, surprisingly, is only owned in 50% of Yahoo formats right now. I had to check on that. So I would probably go Sproles over Smallwood if you need someone to be productive weeks 1, 2, and 3 maybe. But Smallwood's someone who I think could eventually, Sproles is getting up there. He's been around a long time here, a veteran player. Smallwood's someone who I think will see his role expand as the season gets later on. Smallwood was a player I targeted in best ball formats in those MFL 10s because, that's at 34 years old. It's tough to see what we'll get out of Sproles. I think he might be a little bit more productive early in the year, but late in the year, that stash option for Smallwood. I'd not seeing it with LeGarrette Blount because Doug Peterson really likes to run the off-tackle stuff, and LeGarrette Blount excels the most in between the tackles. So that is a potential detriment to someone like Sproles or Smallwood if Blount stays around and gets the short yardage. But I think the majority of the rushing yards, I would probably guess that from a pure yardage standpoint, Sproles plus Smallwood exceeds Blount this year. I
think I'd buy that. I think Sproles is going to be busy. Yeah, I think that's a good one. I agree. Two guys I wanted to ask you about. I'm looking at the ownership percentages. Jeremy Hill is 48%. Now, that Bengals backfield could be a mess. We don't know about the offensive line. They're playing the Ravens, who should be tough. But if you're going to ask me about running backs who could score a touchdown this week, I feel like Jeremy Hill would be in my top 25.
Yeah, for non-PPR formats, I'm with you there. I'm buying this from Jeremy Hill. I know he's been a little bit banged up. We got him with a questionable tag. He's been dealing with an ankle injury, so that's limited him a little bit in the preseason. But this is a case where we have a rookie back in this backfield in Joe Mixon that we expect to eventually take over and become the lead back. But in the early season, what's to stop the Bengals from going to what they know, especially Jeremy Hill in short yardage situations? So it'd be very tough for me to start an unknown like Joe Mixon in week 1. But I mean, of course, when it comes down to the end of the year, Mixon will probably lead that three-headed monster there in yards. But you think the Patriots backfield is tough to assess? Bengals fall right in there. So it is a little bit of a gamble with any of those guys.
All right. And speaking of backfields that are tough to assess, my man CJ Prosise, if I'm in a PPR and they're playing the Packers, now they have Lacey and they have Rawls and they have Chris Carson and they have Prosise. I think the one thing we seem to be clear on is that Prosise is going to be the third down back. As to whether he gets more work than that, it might be a later in the season thing rather than a week 1 thing. You wouldn't. I probably wouldn't even flex him unless I was in a dire straits, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see the Packers being one of those matchups where Prosise could get more use, but again, you'd have to be flexing him in maybe a 16-teamer because there is a lot of uncertainty. Now, Prosise, just 6 games last year, caught 17 passes, racked up 208 receiving yards, a lot more productive through the air than he was on the ground. And the skill is there. In a matchup against the Packers, if this matchup were in week 7 or 8, then I'd be more comfortable with someone like Prosise after we kind of get a feel for how that backfield's going to shake out. But a matchup against the Packers, you would imagine there needs to be a lot of points scored in that game to match the high-powered offense led by Aaron Rodgers, and that means a lot of work from the third down back. So I see where you're coming from. I do think Prosise needs to be owned in just about all formats because there is a lot of late season potential and a lot of upside athleticism there. Week 1, you're right, though. It is a little bit shaky.
Okay. Everybody, you've been waiting for this since February 6th. Football season is here, and there's no better way to get closer to the game you love than with DraftKings 1 Week Fantasy Football. To celebrate, DraftKings is hosting a $100,000 contest this Sunday that's totally free to enter. And if you draft the perfect lineup, $1 billion, Jake. Can you believe that for fantasy football, $1 billion?
Yeah, $1 billion. That's like filling out a perfect bracket, but it's always fun to play. I love that. I love that whole scheme that they've got going on because it's going to get a lot of people into daily fantasy sports, and they'll realize how much fun it is and want to do it more and more every week.
Right. I mean, I'm thinking about when I started playing fantasy football in 1988. That someone was going to tell me I could get $1 billion for a free lineup. And I was sitting there with a notebook and getting stats out of the newspaper. And someone's giving me $1 billion for a perfect lineup. This sounds awesome, DraftKings. I love this. All right. With DraftKings, there are many ways to play. Choose between public contests with big cash prizes or private contests where you compete against a group of your friends. I love that option. DraftKings also has beginner and casual contests where you play against people of similar skill level. The best part is you get to draft a new team each week without any commitment. So you don't, like last year, if you drafted Todd Gurley, you didn't have to suffer all season. You just didn't have to pick him the next week. So get to DraftKings.com now and use promo code WIRE to play in DraftKings' free contest with $100,000 in total prizes this Sunday. And if you draft the perfect lineup, you can win $1 billion. That's promo code WIRE to play for your shot to win $1 billion this Sunday. The contest is totally free to enter, so why wouldn't you try? DraftKings, the game inside the game. Eligibility restrictions apply, but see DraftKings.com for details. Again, $1 billion. Go check it out on DraftKings. Let's go wide receivers, Jake. So the people, some of the miserable people that see Spencer Ware owners are not happy. Julian Edelman owners are not happy. I am a Julian Edelman owner in an MFL. And my favorite MFL that I placed with some of my friends, I picked Julian Edelman in round 4. Ooh. So if I'm scouting the Pats wide receivers, who do you think is going to benefit? Because it seems like there's a lot of moving parts there and there's no obvious choice.
Yeah, of course, Bill Belichick offenses are always tough to predict on a week-to-week basis, and there is a lot going on here. So I would have definitely agreed with Edelman as a 4th-round pick in the PPR format like an MFL 10. But if you're in a season long and you have Edelman, I do like looking within the team to replace him. First and foremost, that being Chris Hogan. Chris Hogan went just outside of the top 100 in one of my drafts last night. But looking back at Yahoo, he's owned an 82%. So if your league hasn't had Fab yet, there's a slight chance that he's around there. And I think within the team, Chris Hogan immediately steps up to be that wide receiver 2 behind Brandon Cooks. Of course, Cooks and Rob Gronkowski are going to get the lion's share of the targets for that team. But after Cooks, in terms of wide receivers, I like Hogan 2, Danny Amendola 3, and Malcolm Mitchell 4. Of course, Phillip Dorsett is a player the Patriots just added here. But our NFL editor, Mike Doria, pointed out to me that Phillip Dorsett physically looks almost like Brandon Cooks. They're 5'10", about 190, and are both deep threats. So instead of Forsett stepping into the slot or something like that, I'm sorry, Dorsett, not Forsett. Instead of Dorsett stepping into the slot or something like that, I see him as more of a direct backup to Brandon Cooks and not really someone that is worth adding. If you're looking within the Patriots, it's got to be Chris Hogan, because even in the preseason game that Edelman got hurt, it was Hogan that immediately came off the bench to take his place in most formations. I see that's how it's going to be for most of the year. So Chris Hogan is your top Patriots receiver target. I could see making a small bid for Danny Amendola, just in case there is, I guess, some slight upside there. But I'd be targeting Hogan first.
All right, Hogan, 82% owned on Yahoo, so no guarantees at all you're going to get him. But you definitely need to look for him. Yeah, Amendola, I keep saying, I see lines of like 8 catches for 54 yards coming. So
a lot of those, which is productive in a PPR format on occasion. But yeah, standard formats would be rough, and it is a little risky.
All right, Saints, Willie Snead out suspended 3 weeks. Who do you like? I have a hard time with Ted Ginn on the Saints.
Yeah, Ted Ginn's very boomer bust. He's someone that we keep referring back to those MFL 10s that are best ball formats. He's maybe someone to take in the later rounds there. I can see about maybe $5 to $8 maximum on someone like Ted Ginn this week, because I do see that there is, of course, the potential for a long touchdown. It will be tough. The Vikings have an excellent defense, but at the same time, I could see Ted Ginn being maybe this year's Steve Smith, someone who's awesome in the first 3 games and then doesn't really do much the rest of the season, a veteran of that sort. So I think Ted Ginn is reasonable to. It's a tough call this week against the Vikings in a deep format,
right?
But Ted Ginn's an ad just because of the next couple weeks. He's actually owned in 67% of Yahoo formats, so people are definitely catching up on that. There's not as much availability as we originally thought, but he's someone that is worth adding, probably should be owned, especially while Snead is out. If anything, you've got good wide receivers, pick up Ted Ginn just to block someone else from getting him and potentially getting a 180-yard touchdown pass against you. That's a strategy that we do like to advocate over the course of the year. That goes hand in hand with the theme of making the most of your roster better. But you should, even if you're comfortable with your starters, be picking up guys just so other people aren't.
Okay. You mentioned Mike Glennon earlier. Thinking, they're going to be losing. They're going to throw. Cameron Meredith's not there anymore. Who's Mike Glennon going to throw to, do you think?
Well, I think we're going to see a decent amount of Kevin White. Of course, he was a first-round pick that never really panned out a ton last year. But physically 6'3", 215. He's 25 years old. He should be in his athletic prime. I think we'll see a decent amount of him. And I also think we're going to see a little bit more Zach Miller than people expect, kind of a comfort option, the tight end there. I would not necessarily go aggressively after someone like Marcus Wheaton or Kendall Wright, especially with Marcus Wheaton dealing with that finger injury. So he's going to be out a couple weeks, probably not going to help you a whole lot. I mean, Kendall Wright is an option, I guess. You'd have to be in a really, really deep format. I mean, he has had years where, he did catch 94 balls with the Titans one year. So I guess there might be a little bit of Kendall Wright appeal as he starts to enter the final years of his prime. But overall, I think it boosts the value. Cam Meredith's injury, if anything, boosts the value of Kevin White the most, but he's probably not available. Kendall Wright is one of those flyer options, I'd say.
Okay, yeah, Kevin White. I want it to be Kevin White. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just whether it will be or not. I mean, we're going to find out. I think Kevin White's got that potential to be next weekend's hot free agent pickup. Because if he's healthy, or next week's top free agent, if he's healthy and he lives up to any level of his potential this week, if Glennon throws them a lot, people are going to go, that's it, first round pick, go get him. So
yeah,
you
absolutely.
Might be early
he's
on the
someone
train to him.
Yeah, he's someone we could be advocating a $26 to $31 bid. I always like to go one over the even marks there. But next week, he's only owned in 49% of Yahoo leagues, so it's a coin flip that he's out there. And if you're in a deep league, he's probably gone. But if you're in a 12-team league, it wouldn't hurt to get him now when he'll cost you $1 or $2 instead of next week when he'll cost you $20 or $30.
Okay. Kenny Golladay in Detroit got some hype in August. Mm-hmm. Did you buy it? Is he a guy that you would own? What format would it take for you to want to bid on him?
It would probably be 14 or 16 teams. I think he can be left alone in the 12 teamers for now. He's someone, I don't know, that maybe if you have an injury, but you still like your starting lineup and you just want to pick a guy up for 0 with some potential, I could buy that. Kenny Galladay has the build, 6'4", 215, to be a red zone target, to maybe surpass Marvin Jones. We saw what Marvin Jones was able to do last year with the Lions, was surprisingly productive for most, of course, boosted by some of those games against my Packers. But beside the point, the Galladay hype has faded quite a bit since that big 2-touchdown game in the preseason, but he is still rosterable in a deeper format. I'm not sure I'd start him going against the Cardinals secondary this week. You really can't do that, but he's someone with a ton of availability that, is maybe worth an ad just to kind of take up space more than a guy that's injured or a second kicker or something like that.
All right. And like you said, that matchup with the Cardinals secondary, not great. Marvin Jones, 67% owned. So I like Marvin Jones right now. I feel like some people here on this podcast have talked me into Marvin Jones more. I owned him last year and he burned me, but he was hurt. He's a pretty good receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably, if you need someone that's going to help you in the first 5 weeks of the season, I would pick up Marvin Jones at that ownership percentage. Kenny Galladay is only owned at 15%, so there's probably more availability there. But our own Clay Link at RotoWire, we did a draft last night, and he took Galladay in our 12-teamer, so he is rostered in the league that I'm looking at him right now. So it's more of a stash option. If you were to take him in a 10 or 12-teamer after that hype that got built up from the preseason game, he can maybe be a drop candidate. I always hate doing that before you really see regular season action. But if you really need a roster spot and they're in a shallow format, chances are he'll be back to pick up next week if you need him back. So there's some appeal there, but not as much as there was 2-3 weeks ago.
Okay, some guys I wanted to ask you about that are at relatively low ownership percentages. So we'll do the lightning round of wide receivers. Zay Jones, any interest?
Yeah, definitely some interest. He's gone in just about every draft that I've done over the past week, and Jordan Matthews has had some trouble staying healthy. He's had some trouble with drops, so there needs to be some receiver that gets the targets from Tyra Taylor. Of course, the value takes a big hit if it's Nathan Peterman, but I think Zay Jones should be owned in just about all 12-teamers and beyond.
And he's in 44% of leagues. Robbie Anderson, Bryce Petty did throw to him a lot the last few games last year. I know he's not perfect, and it's a bad offense. But
yeah, Robbie Anderson's been going in most of the drafts there. That depth chart in New York is absolutely dreadful, and somebody's got to catch passes. I wouldn't be surprised if the Forte-Powell combination catches more passes than any single wide receiver, the way that offense is built. But, there's got to be at least one receiver on every team that is somewhat fantasy relevant, and I think it would be Robbie Anderson over Jermaine Kearse in New York.
All right, any interest in Cooper Kupp? I mean, the Rams, not a high-powered offense, and they have Sammy Watkins and Todd Gurley.
Mm-hmm. I own Kupp in one league, and it's a $1 player in a keeper league. So I'm not looking to throw him out into my lineup week 1, week 2, probably even. There's long-term upside, but in redraft format, that upside diminishes a little bit, just as a rookie receiver with not a great quarterback and other options in the wide receiving group.
Okay, Kupp is 25% owned and probably a PP. I mean, he's one. Goff was looking at him short, slot guy. Could maybe that Danny Amendola comp that I mentioned earlier.
I mean, if you need a 10-point floor in a couple, or 10-point floor might even be a little bit generous. But if you need someone that's at least going to score points, probably catch a pass or two in a really, really deep format, then maybe he's someone you look at.
All right, last one. Paul Richardson. Now that Kearse is gone, Paul Richardson is a starting receiver for the Seahawks, who say they're going to open things up a little more. Any interest there? I like Paul. I always thought Paul Richardson was a little underrated. Someone on Monday, Dennis Hesser was on with me and was talking about Paul Richardson a little bit as sort of a guy people are forgetting about that could be DC. He's not going to blow it up, but could he be? I don't know about startable, not in a 12-teamer anyway.
He's maybe a stash option. I think the Seahawks, and I know their offensive line isn't great, but they do really want to return to running the ball a lot this year. And I think we'll see a little bit more of a run-heavy approach. And like the Patriots, their top 2 pass catchers are a receiver and a tight end. I think Baldwin and Jimmy Graham are going to be big factors. Jimmy Graham was going as a top 3-4 tight end in a lot of my drafts this year. Paul Richardson, to me, depends on Tyler Lockett a little bit. He's just dealing with a minor injury here. Should be back, a leg injury. But remember when everyone was taking Tyler Lockett in like the 5th round last year? A lot of times I think as as so-called fantasy experts or seasoned fantasy players, they see these guys with big talent and potential and are a year early on him. That could very well happen with Tyler Lockett this year. So yeah, there is a little bit of appeal to Paul Richardson, but as far as a stash option, I'm taking the explosiveness of Tyler Lockett to occupy the bottom spots on my bench.
All right. Everybody, hey, raise your hand if you won less than you thought last season at Daily Fantasy Football. Jake, did you think you were going to hit it big?
My hand's up over here.
Yeah. Yeah, you play against sharks and people are entering, $20 a piece at 100 entries, stuff like that. It's a nice challenge, and if you take those guys down, that's great. But, more often than not, it's kind of a losing proposition. If you're tired of losing at Daily Fantasy Football, check out Let's Rumble in the Apple App Store. Let's Rumble matches you with players of the same skill level, giving you a fair chance every time. You can play head-to-head for your best chance of winning, or group up to play multiple rivals for a bigger payout. You can rank in the weekly leaderboards to win free cash prizes. You heard that right, free cash prizes awarded every week. All you have to do is play the game, and you'll be entered in the leaderboard. Your highest score will determine your spot that week. Download Let's Rumble in the Apple App Store now and get a free $5 bonus with your deposit. Folks, if you want to win in daily fantasy, I encourage you to check out Let's Rumble in the Apple App Store. All right, let's wrap it with tight ends. I talked about O.J. Howard as a guy who you might have drafted early on, and now if you have him, you're going, maybe a little buyer's remorse and you're not interested in starting him. Is there a guy, here's what first I want to ask. The worry guy is Eric Ebron. He was on a lot of people's sort of breakout list, including mine. He returned to practice Monday, but he's been bothered by an injury, and we don't know what his status is going to be. Is there anybody else who worries you, sort of in the top 15 tight end range that you're looking at and you're going, I don't know that I want to start this guy in week one?
Jack Doyle was someone that was getting drafted as maybe a low-end tight end one in 12 to 14 teamers, and with Scott Tolzien at the helm, there's security blanket possibilities. I'm just saying that because he's a tight end, not because of any known chemistry there. So he's someone that is in fringe tight end one territory that might want to head to your bench this week. You mentioned Ebron, Tyler Eifert. He was back in practice Monday with a knee issue. He missed the last 2 preseason games. You'd think he'd be okay, but guys, it's Tyler Eifert. When have you ever really been able to count on him to be okay consistently? So maybe there's a little bit of a worry there. So there are a handful of guys that didn't get drafted. Maybe Jared Cook comes to mind just because there aren't a lot of other tight end options in Oakland, and he is a big target for Derek Carr. Someone that if they're not bowling it to Marshawn Lynch, in short yardage situations, throw it up to a 6'5", 250 Jared Cook, just like Aaron Rodgers did a lot last year. Possibility there, and he's out there, so he's someone to look at potentially. Some other guys I wrote down. I guess Evan Ingram's probably more of a stash option. A young tight end, someone maybe owned in keeper formats, but the Giants have typically like going to a tight end, and he could be someone they look to. So there are a couple options, but we all know that after week one, there's going to be that crazy tight end that nobody thought of that emerges out of nowhere. That'll be the Gary Barnidge type or something like that, where you're going to be able to pick them up and help you do some damage in your leagues. Right.
I got 2 guys that I want to talk about. First, George Kittle with the Niners. Now, this would be a reach. This might be I'm actually writing that down as a DFS option. Here's why. He's starting for the Niners since they traded Vance McDonald. Mm-hmm. He didn't catch a ton of passes at Iowa, but over the last 2 seasons, he caught 42 passes over the last 2 seasons, but averaged about 14 plus, almost 14 and a half yards per catch. I want to read you a quote from John Lynch in July. He's really flashed. He's got some suddenness to him in his movements. He catches the ball extremely well. He gives us something we don't have as a playmaker down in the red zone. He's that guy that can go one-on-one, that can impose his will and out-athlete people. It's the Niners. Yes. There's not a lot of guys to throw to.
Exactly. Beyond Pierre Garçon, no one jumps out as a clear pass catcher. What's impressive, kind of to paraphrase what Lynch said there, is that George Kittle is 6'4", 250 almost, and he recorded a 4.5 240 time. For that size, that's tremendous. So he's definitely someone that is quick and will be able to sneak up on you over the middle and potentially outrun linebackers. So I do have slight concerns about jumping out there week one, just because of who knows how that pass catching distribution is going to show up. Of course, you mentioned they got the Panthers, right?
Yep.
So being a better defense than we anticipated. So maybe he does, if he burns them early, I think Kuechly's going to pay a little bit more attention to him. So I'm a little hesitant week one, but I do think that he's a player. Most fantasy sites have a watch list feature where you kind of click a bunch of players and stars next to them, and you can kind of you can do this on RotoWire.com too. Set up those players and wait for news to come out, and that's a good strategy for helping to decide on future waiver wire picks. He's one of those young players that there's a little bit of uncertainty, but he'll be someone that I could see being a popular ad down the road if he starts getting more involved in the offense.
All right, folks. That's it for our free agent and fab recommendations for the week. Listeners to this podcast can get a free 10-day RotoWire trial at rotowire.com/pod. No credit card required, and that lets you check out nearly all the features on the site. Check it out, rotowire.com/pod. You only get the free trial if you review and rate this podcast on iTunes.
Yeah, you definitely go out there and do that.
I'm actually kidding, but I really want you to review and rate the podcast, everybody. Yeah. Jake, what else you got going on this week?
I'm going to be getting ready for UFC 215 on Saturday. And, of course, all the week one, I've got a lot of fab waiver wire stuff coming up tomorrow. Just checking everything out, getting ready for football season, getting all our customers that have that 10-day free trial help set up using our draft software and that for other remaining drafts. Of course, our iOS Draft Kit app is out there and ready to go. So football and UFC for me this week. Yeah.
Remember I told you last time when we talked about UFC that I promised you I was going to watch? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, I can't blame you. I mean, Jones had a heck of a knockout at that UFC 214, but now he's popped for another USADA violation. So a really, really depressing possible end to what was a great career.
One of these weeks, I'm really gonna watch it. I swear, I don't know when, but I'll surprise you on one of the Tuesdays because we're gonna be here every Tuesday. Jake and I are doing this every Tuesday, talking about waiver wire pickups, fab bids, things like that. Please check it out. Again, Mondays we're gonna wrap up the weekend. Tuesdays we're gonna do this. Thursdays, we're going to preview the weekend, and Fridays, we are going to sort of put a bow on it and talk about the injury reports and things like that. So please check out the RotoWire Fantasy Football Contest. Tell your friends. Jake, I'll talk to you next week.
It's the most important show you'll see all week. You listen to all week. It's the best one that'll help you to win in your league. Thanks as always, John, and looking forward to be back with you all season.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it as well. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by Fanball. Our next episode is going to be coming on Thursday, like I said, so please check back then to get you all ready for week one. For Jake Letarski, I'm John Halpin. See you next time.